I think we're actually at the beginning of that cycle. We still see a lot of potential for growth. If you just look at sort of retail sales, what percentage of retail sales is done through e-commerce, that's still, especially in continental Europe, quite low. You know, anywhere between 0 and 10%. Whereas if you talk to e-commerce operators, they will tell you that they think that this will stabilize at 25%. So that gives you some sense of the growth that is still to come in e-commerce, and frankly we see that also other 3PLs are really in the process of adapting themselves to these changes, and also making sure that they have the systems in place and the flexibility to work with that.
I think it's kind of been covered, and just be controversial. E-commerce is kind of old news now. It's just a new demand driver in our sector, which leads to incremental demand. But it's the multiple layers of what e-commerce is doing. You've got the dedicated providers like the Amazons who attract all the attention. But the reality is every single retailer that we do business with is doing e-commerce in some shape or form. Well, there are a couple of trends that have occurred. So one, over 70% of the European population now have access to broadband. Growth in e-commerce sales has been 14% on a cumulative average basis over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's projected to continue to run at that rate for the next 5 years. So it'll go from somewhere around 170 billion euros plus or minus through to something close to 2 times that. And not necessarily to the detriment of traditional retail. It's just changing the shape of how we buy. If I think about how I buy, I did Santa Claus at Christmas all on the web, and I bought 3 times more than my wife told me I should, and I didn't send anything back. So there is actually incremental growth from stupidity as well, perhaps. But so it is absolute growth in the way it's incremental retail spend first and foremost. UK has led the charge. Germany very far out in front. France beginning to show signs of really pushing growth, not only with the traditional operators, but also some other international e-commerce operators like Rakuten, who we signed a deal with in an absolute standard spec building. So the specification still works for those guys. And Central Europe, clearly Amazon are leading the charge in terms of developing their first generation of facilities. So there's the Amazons, and then there's everybody else, plus a whole plethora of new entrants, adding to incremental demand in our sector. And that's just going to continue to be the case for many, many years to come. And it's incremental for us as an industry, which is a wonderful thing. Growth is finite, but population growth perhaps isn't. So I believe there's always going to be growth. I think there is a significant shift from traditional retail to buying online. And I do see that growth pushing out material opportunity for us as a sector to supply into, at least for the next 5 years.